Okay. All right. So what's up, everyone? We're back after a little hiatus from 4th of July. We're in week 5 with Foundations of Leadership. This week, we're going to be talking about prioritization. It's also, we labeled it as time management. And it's kind of, it blends a little bit of the two, but we ended up shifting to prioritization overall, just because we want you guys to focus on the bigger picture here. We're going to be talking about 3 concepts, and when we're really talking about is the big picture, your organization, your customers, your products, the day-to-day tasks, those are, good. And there's tools and methodologies that we've covered in previous courses, and then we'll cover later on. But in the meantime, what the intent and the focus of really this prioritization is to look at the big picture. And we break this down into 3 concepts: the mission, the men, and me. And it's kind of influenced by Peter Blaber. He wrote a book, The Mission, the Men, and Me. Pete Blaber was a former Delta Force commander back in kind of the earlier days. And, he, throughout his time, it really came down to these 3 big things that they focused on in regards to success. And, in the book, highly recommend reading it both for personal and professional development. There's key takeaways. He talks about how not to make a mountain out of a molehill, how to always rely on kind of boots on the ground intel is what he calls it. And from a business perspective, always getting a firsthand perspective and a firsthand look of what's going on instead of leaving it up for interpretation. So there's a lot of good takeaways from the book. Highly recommend reading it. But the way he breaks down and prioritizes things at the mission level, his teammates, and then himself as a third priority, it's kind of how we're going to look at things and how you should prioritize things going forward. So really quick, the way we look at this, right? Prioritization, managing your time effectively is essential for successful leadership, right? You can maybe start things off as a solopreneur handling everything, but as you scale and as you grow, you're going to end up having to grow a team, build a team, and then pass off tasks, delegate, right? And we talked about delegation previously. And the biggest thing too is when you're talking about these tasks and that you're going to delegate, you have to prioritize them and make sure that your team is aligned, or the person that you're going to delegate these to are aligned in these types of priorities, from top down being the mission, the team, and then yourself. And we'll go into detail a little bit further into all these aspects. So the mission, it's pretty simple. It's the big picture, right? These are business decisions that ensure your business endures over time, okay? You can't prioritize anything such as yourself or even a teammate above the bigger picture, which is the success of your business. That's your strategic position, your strategic decisions, strategic and operational implementation, any of those big decisions that you are making to ensure that your company will endure over time. That's the mission. That's a big picture. It can also go beyond the organization itself, right? The biggest thing that runs organizations, and Amazon is a huge believer, and they're one of their 14 principles, is customers, right? And you've heard the saying, customer is always right. The point of that always is you drive to customer satisfaction, whether it's Lean Six Sigma, Amazon's principles. There's many successful tools out there that drive to the priority of ensuring that the customer and their requirements are met. And then a step down from that, programs. If you're a team lead on a program, the success of that program has to be the #1 priority, right? And then products. If that program is launching a product, if that product is built specific for a customer, those all have to be 100%, and that team has to be committed to achieving those goals, both from a customer, a program, a product, and an organizational perspective. So when we talk about alignment, it's about aligning what the bigger picture means to these people when you start to delegate tasks, and also how to make sure that they all succeed and are prioritizing the bigger picture in general. Chris, you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So before we get into the team or the men as it's described in the book, I did put something in the chat. I don't know if you all saw it, but specifically it's called it was described as the men because when Peter Blood wrote the book and when he was in Delta Force, predominantly all male organization. So in this situation, it's going to be the team, right? That is who you're focused on next. Jeff, did you want to go into your conversation about the story for the mission right now, or you want to do it after?
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. So real quick, basically the bigger takeaway from the mission aspect, right? There was a story that I was told. So I have friends over in tier 1 units, and one of the things they told us was if something happened where there was mission success, but an elite level American operator was KIA, in order for that to succeed, and you could rewind time and you ask people what would happen, you ask their friends or their family, they're like, of course, you want to change that mistake that happened to bring them back, right? But maybe that wouldn't have caused mission success. If you ask the operator that same question, be like, don't bring me back. That would mean my death would have done, the mission would have failed and that death would have been for nothing. It's a little dramatic and it's a little big picture, right? But it understands, like, when you're making these types of decisions and you're talking about executing and what the best decision is for your team, or excuse me, your company, or your programs or your products, your customers, those are kind of the bigger things. Like, what are you going to sacrifice in order to make sure that, your organization continues on? This is a good decision. What are you going to sacrifice to make sure that this decision or this priority is in the best interest of your organization or your customers, right? Like, you always want to, from a mission perspective, when you have to make a decision, kind of think of it, is this going to help my business in the long term? Is this going to make me better now? It may be high cost at this point in time to implement. It may be high cost to adhere, but over time, those costs are going to go down. Your value to your customers are going to go up, and then your organization is going to go up. And it's all because you're making a sacrificial decision at that point in time. So it's kind of, like I said, a little bit of a dramatic and deep example, but it kind of goes to show, like, these guys and these elite level leaders, and, we talk about bringing in military perspective in this, right? Like, these guys are willing to die for their cause and their mission from a higher level perspective. Business owners kind of have to do the same thing, at least understand the sacrifices they're going to have to make now in order that their business endures. And if you look at different cultures, Chris and I talked about this last night during the review. If you look at Japan, right, their culture, especially from a business perspective, is all about longevity. That, I'm not exactly sure how many companies in the United States of America are over, 100 years old. There's definitely some out there, right? But have they gone through their ups and downs? Have they transitioned? Have they bankrupt, right? When you go over to the Japanese culture, that's the norm of companies being over hundreds of years old. They build for the long haul. They build to endure, not only over their lifetime, but their family's generations. And these aren't even family-owned companies. Maybe they start out that way, but over time, there's going to be transition. But it's the mindset of building an enduring organization, an enduring brand. So when you start to make these types of decisions and you start to make investments and you start to make these types of sacrifices, make sure that you're doing in the best interest of that bigger mission first. And then you will trickle down to, like, all right, does this mission's taken care of? The next is the team. Okay, they're taken care of. Okay, then we'll make sure that I'm satisfied, So that's kind of where all that stems from. But thanks for bringing that up, Chris. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So next priority is going to be our team. And so as we assign our biggest time block to the strategic mission, or saying, hey, I've assigned now the first priority to this mission, now I'm going to assign whatever time required to accomplish that. Next is going to be focusing on the team. So with your organization, it is made up of as we talked about previously, team building. You've created this proper team. You've looked at who's supposed to be in the right places, what their skill sets are, what their capabilities, based upon what the customer is asking for you to succeed with. So the customer's mission set or the organization mission determines what your team needs to do successfully. You've built that team, and now you need to focus on, how is my team fully functioning? And how do I put them in the best position? So in this case, I'm focused on what materials, what time, what information, what expectations do I need to provide to my team for them to be successful? And then I assign a time factor to those different aspects. So now I say, I've given time over to the strategic objective, the mission. And now I say, cool, the next set of time is going to my employees, my team, and everyone I'm working with. And if you run out of time at this point, because you've assigned time to the mission and to the team, looks like you don't have any time left for yourself. That's how sometimes how the cookie crumbles. And that's something that I've had to deal with a good amount of time. But as most of you know, when you go through a business project or you go through any sort of project as a leader, as soon as your presentation is done, there's still 30 to 45 minutes, if not an hour or more time that's required on your end as the leader to follow up, to delegate, to give out tasks, to assign action items, to whatever that is. And that's still extra effort on your part to make sure the team is set up to continue being successful. And then you can worry about how you feel, your emotional problems, you're tired, whatever else. So aspect that's most relevant to me with the team aspect, when I was doing rescue swimming out in the Red Sea, the biggest thing that everyone sees is like, oh, you go in the water and you pick someone up. Okay, they're drowning, they've jumped off a boat, they're a pirate, they don't know how to swim, whatever it is. So when we get people out of the water, everyone says, wow, you saved someone, that's amazing. They didn't do it by myself, right? I was AKA the leader, but like there's a whole team that's involved in getting this done. And so prior to us going into any sort of situation, I have to brief the team, prep all my materials, make sure that everything I'm doing is all my tools and everything I'm going to use to swim it out and go get someone is in the right spot. And then I make sure my team knows what they're supposed to do, that they know where they're supposed to be, that they know exactly what stuff they're supposed to be doing. Because if their team isn't taken care of and you haven't assigned the right time to them, to me, the most important person when I was doing rescue swimming was the person who didn't know how to do anything else except point in the water where someone is. Because out in the middle of the ocean, it's very hard to see anything, right? And so if someone put that person that's pointing, like, hey, that you have to swim 300 meters that direction, go pick them up. Awesome. But if I can't see them and I don't have anyone telling me or pointing, then they've let me down. We've let that person down, the customer, right? We've let that person down. And so everyone in your team has a role to play, and you need to assign the appropriate time to that team. Jeff, we can move to the next one whenever you're ready. Does anyone have any questions on that or comments?
So I just want to add one thing here, and this kind of goes back to decisiveness, like a few weeks ago, right? And for the military guys on here, you may be familiar with this, with like the 1/3, 2/3 rule of like planning and execution. I think from a strategic leadership perspective, you have to understand that when we talk about setting your team up for success, and as Chris brings in a time block, make sure you're giving them ample time to succeed. You know, like there's one thing to put pressure on to make sure that like you're going to provide a product in a proper amount of time that, you know, beats the industry standard, is competitive, that, you know, is above the expectation of the customer. But don't give them impossible tasks, or don't set them up to fail because you're waiting for a perfect solution. We talked about the 40-70 rule, right? Like make that decision within the 40-70 limit, and then give that necessary time for your team to get hands-on and start getting work done. You know, that's setting them up for success, because once they start working, you may find out the extra 10, 20, 30%, 40% that was left on the table, and you can provide solutions to that in the long run. Or, you know, as your team's working on that borrowed 2/3 time. You know, don't wait for that perfect decision. Set them up for success in regards to time, like Chris said, and allow them the proper time to do their work and succeed. You know, that's one aspect in setting them up for success for sure. So before we go on to the leaders, are there any questions, as Chris mentioned, or comments or anything? Okay. So the last priority is you as a leader, right? And one of the bigger things I take out of this right off the bat is, you know, there's many reasons why successful business owners don't turn a profit the first year, the second year. Sometimes it takes a couple of years, right? There could be different things, marketing challenges or market challenges, industry challenges, you know, whatever. It just takes time, right? It takes time to master your craft, as we said. But I'll tell you exactly where failed business owners, they start paying themselves way before they start investing in the mission, start investing in building their team, because they want, you know, that flashy car way before they're well-deserved and able to do it. So they'll sink their own company unknowingly because they want to flash some bling around. So successful business owners, again, that, you know, you as a leader, as a successful business owner, that's sacrifice, right? You have to sacrifice a little bit in this regards, especially towards the mission. investing in your company, investing in your team, making sure that you have the right team around you, right? Like that's what builds a company and an organization and a brand to endure time. When you have the right investments, the right infrastructure, the right team around you, invest in that first, and then you can start paying yourself in the long run. So a huge takeaway is that second bullet point, and I think a successful business owner and how much they pay themselves is really going to depend on, the marketing strategy, the industry. There's a lot of different variables there, but I can guarantee you every single failed business owner will try to line their pockets before they invest in their company or their team. That's a huge commonality that I think a lot of people don't realize they even are doing because they want some material item or they just want money. If you're going to invest in this in the long run. Yeah, Murillo, go ahead.
So I've started a few businesses over the years, and that's always the question: how much do you pay yourself? In the beginning of the business, in the middle of the business, as the business grows. And I really actually had a banker told me one time I wasn't paying myself enough, which I thought was great. I thought, thank you. I take that as a compliment. But my approach, whether it's right or wrong, I always try to figure out the danger. If you don't pay yourself anything, you create an unsustainable business, and the business will die because you can't. It's like you can not eat and feed everybody around you and then starve because everybody else is thriving, but you can't make ends meet. So that's a bad situation. If you pay yourself too much, you steal from you starve the business, and you run the business out, which is the case you make. My approach has always been, first of all, what's the salary for this position? I work for my company, so I have a salary that I pay myself based on this size of company with this type of what I bring to the table. I'll pay myself this. If I can't pay myself that in the beginning, I'll pay myself what I can. So we're breaking even until I'm able to, after continue as the revenue grows, I'll match my salary, but then I stop. Because at one point, business owners do that. They pay themselves a salary, but then they use the company card for everything else. They just go, oh, it was a business meal, and it was I went to Hawaii, and we talked business. Therefore, that whole trip was a business expense. And I understand you can play that game, but ultimately, if you're responsible enough, at the end of the day, when there's profit, then there's ways to decide how much more money can you get out of the company, what's wise to do it. There are other formulas, but I always trying to set a salary that is congruent with the size and the income of the company, and then figure out what to do with bonuses at the end of the year. So it may not be everybody's approach, but that's how I have done it over the years.
No, that's amazing. And that's the right approach, right? And it's a perfect blend between point 2 and point 3, right? Like you mentioned, you can't starve yourself, but you can't also, it can't be feast or famine in one direction or the other, right? And that kind of goes with bullet point 3. Maybe you're not operating 100%, but you always try to. But to your point, Murillo, if you're starving yourself, then you're not. Your perspective is going to change. You're not going to be able to provide for the business. You're going to run into financial issues that may make you sway a decision. So to your point, you have to put boundaries up for yourself in order to make sure that you're operating in the best interest of the mission or your business, your team, and yourself, because your team and your organization rely on you. If you're a shell of who you are, or if you're going broke and you're struggling, you're not going to be able to provide for your organization or your team. And that's a perfect example of setting a good boundary and understanding the limits of being able to do so. That's a great example. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So what this also comes out to in terms of yourself as a leader and your personal time commitment and prioritization. We have this thing we like to focus on, especially what we're doing now with my current company. It's just talking about work-life balance. Once you've understood, if you've really gone in and understood yourself as a person and know, I need to go to the gym 3 times a week to be satisfied, or I need to play video games for 1 hour a week, or I need to get 5 hours of sleep minimum, or I need to go do hot yoga in the mornings, or I need to wake up and look at the sun for 35 minutes, like Elon Musk said you need to do. Whatever, right? Whatever, like the thing is that you need to go do that ensures that you're at least operating at a minimum level of efficacy. That's kind of your boundary personally, right? And so this focus here, right? The focus here for prioritization, there's going to be it's a seesaw effect. So at the beginning, when you become a leader, you're obviously going to put it more time to your team and be giving, and you're going to be, it's going to be more of a famine kind of situation because I'm giving away more of my personal currency, my time to make sure I have the right team in the right spots. I've given them the right expectations. I've delegated all these tasks. They know what success looks like. All those things we've covered in previous classes. But as that moves along, your team gets better. If their efficiency goes up, their success rate goes up, their understanding of what success looks like goes up, and you, as you continue to be more successful, that time can be given back to you. So as this goes, we definitely need to be always reevaluating what are the levels of my priority. Am I 2/3 to the mission and men or mission and team and 1/3 to myself, or am I 60% there and 40 to myself? Whatever that delineation needs to be based on your team's capability and success rate. And if it's just you alone, then that's one thing you always need to be thinking about and looking at. And that may be a system. I don't know if anyone has a system they use. Like at the end of the week, I always review I sit down and write how my week is, or I plan out my next week and I prioritize it. If anyone has those things, Jeff's going to go into some great prioritization steps and some different models of things that are all put together here. But I've used a couple of them in my own life and in the military. But I think that's really going to help out to assess yourself as you go along.
Yeah. And then the final thing before we just get into that, right? I kind of spoke about this on social media a little bit, but you can always ask yourself, right? If you feel like you're not sure on what you did to grow your business as a leader, or just kind of give yourself an accountability check. If you just ask yourself, not what you're going to do later, what you did last week, what your plan is months from now, weeks from now, days from now. If you literally ask yourself, what did you do today to grow your business? And if you have some kind of like cringe feeling, or you're like, oh man, I maybe missed the boat, your gut's going to tell you with that feeling. It's, to me, that is a simple tool as a leader to make sure that you're keeping yourself in check and accountable for your business and for your team. If there's anything that I think any successful business owner knows, when it's to trust your gut, that is one question that I've always asked. And it doesn't even have to be with business. You can ask yourself that question in regards to anything. What did you do today to get closer to your fitness goal? What did you do today to be bigger, stronger, faster? What did you do today to save for your vacation? What did you do? You could ask that any question you want, but your gut is always going to tell you the truth 100% of the time. So, all right. So tools and techniques. So there's take a picture of this. I'm going to send this out as well in the chat. Now you guys will always have this with the slides themselves. Now, can you guys see this? The timular tasks? Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's going to bring you to this site and in this article, and it's the 10 best prioritization techniques. And this kind of goes, what we talked about primarily in this course, right, was the big picture stuff, the 3 big priorities you should always have: the mission, your team, and then yourself, right? This kind of helps you figure out ways to make certain decisions, maybe help out with some of the smaller tasks day to day. Can also help you make decisions on big strategic tasks as well. There's 10 key takeaways and techniques in here, and I'm just going to skim through some of them. This is for you to take away, use, implement immediately. So the RICE method here. Well, that skipped way down. Apologize for the technical error. So the RICE method basically, it means reach, impact, confidence, and effort, right? So how many people or events will be affected by this activity? So what is this activity? Who is it going to reach? Who is it going to touch? What's the quantify the contribution of the activity to the end goal? What's the impact of making this decision? How confident are you about this it's going to make this type of impact that you expect it to. And then the effort. I think a huge thing is how many people are going to be needed to accomplish this task. And, that's what we call a level of effort in regards to the program management world. Like if you have this big strategic goal, but it's going to take every single one of the resources you have, maybe you can't do that right now, even though it's something that you need to do. That's a high cost, high value item. You're going to have to weigh that against some of the other things that you have in front of you. But I think a great way is in regards to the effort to make sure is a key aspect of this in regards to making a decision. The Eisenhower matrix, you guys, we've probably seen this. It's a quadrant where you have urgent down here, important up here, and it's kind of like the high cost, high value matrix. But this kind of dictates to you, 4 different quadrants, and what type of tasks are kind of, dedicated to those different quadrants, right? The ABCDE method, you can just label simple tasks as important tasks, less important, nice to have, delegate, eliminate. That's a simple model. The ICE model for impact, confidence, and ease. It's another spinoff of the RICE model. It's just a little bit different, a little bit simpler. You have your complexity versus effort matrix. Again, another spinoff of kind of that RICE model. And I'm not going to go through every one of them, but it's just an example of the different models that this has here. The Kano model concept sits in a different perspective and approach to prioritization in regards to the customer satisfaction. So it puts their perspectives ahead of, what you may think. So you kind of are ensuring that the customer is heard along with, as a part of the process. So bunch of different tools and techniques here. So I just want to make this available to you guys. I found it very good, and something very simple that you guys can implement and start using today, tomorrow, this week, in your business, in your life, help you with some of those simple tasks and strategic level tasks. So
if we have to pick one, which one would you say what's your easiest to implement?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the RICE model, and it's either the RICE or ICE method because it's 4 simple concepts. And the biggest takeaway that I like out of that is it measures effort, or at least your perceived effort that it would take to accomplish the task. I think a lot of people don't understand, like they want to do something and it's great. And then they're like, wow, I bit off way more than I could chew. It's going to cost more money. It's going to be more time. I'm going to miss deliverables. Now I'm prioritizing resources away from other strategic accounts because of what I didn't know. So that kind of gives you a little bit more of a check. So we use level of effort quite a bit it's in a different form, but level of effort is definitely measured in regards to our program management. So I like RICE and ICE because whenever you can actually get a quantitative or at least some form of accountability against the level of effort that it will take, it paints a much more accurate picture, or it gives you a truer picture. It doesn't leave that up for perception.
Jeff, I'll play the devil's advocate here. If you want to scroll up to the Eisenhower method.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, at least, it all boils down to what is your, how quickly do you have to make a decision? So we talked about decision making. What is the timeline to make this decision? At least for me, in what I've used, especially when I was doing rescue soon in the Navy, this is what our model is based off of, is this Eisenhower matrix of okay, I have to assess 4 people that are in the water. I have to save all 4 of them. And I know that one person has fallen out of a helicopter. I'm going to assume they have head, neck, spinal injury. Okay, that person is urgent, or they're underneath, they still have their mask on. It means they're probably passed out. They're underneath the parachute. And there's all these different factors that tell me that this is urgent and important. And it has to make a quick decision because it's based on life or death. But in your business, right? What if you I have to put this fire out, or this customer asks this really quick action? You may not have time to go through and quantify the level of effort and think about how much time. You may not have time. You may have to say, we have to get this done. Is it important? And doesn't need to be done right now? Boom. Is something else not as important? Boom. Yeah, exactly. Which alligators close? Exactly. Right. So that's the biggest thing is if it's a time sensitive decision, I would say that using the urgency and important method, because you have a really good idea as a leader, that's important. My boss said it, my CEO said it, my It's one of our company strategic goals. The customer needs it by this time. Like if those are how you go through your levels of priority, like that's important. So that's what I use for quick decisions. But otherwise, I go back to the Rice method, and I use a weighted number, and that's kind of how we do our decision points. At least during my day, is like that's going to take 2 hours. I think I'm going to move that to tomorrow because it's not due for 3 days, and I have time to think about that. So that's something to weigh, at least when you're going to choose a method to use.
I think one of the bigger things too, in regards that it helps, is especially from a program or an investment perspective, from a business way, like scope creep. Like if the more we're dealing with this challenge right now in regards to program management, we have customers that always say that they want more and like things are going to evolve, and you always do your best to accommodate, right? But if you have dedicated resources allocated for this program because of basic, maybe a business review document that you agreed on with the customer, and then all of a sudden they change the scope or they want this major add-on, months after you've already initiated this, that a quadrant like this, or using the quadrant, or a method like this, like the rice or ice method, especially when you start to level effort or how long it's going to take to make that decision, that could impact whether you're able to implement that scope creep now, or that allows for proper boundaries to push it for future implementation. Be like, hey, look, all right, no problem, we're going to finish this current BRD and the scope of work that we have, but we're going to implement for another 2 weeks or 2 months, whatever it is, after the fact, but we just can't implement it and then meet the same timeline. Like that's a fair way to put up boundaries with you and the customer and the agreements that you've had, as well as providing quantitative measurements to show them, be like, this type of the level of effort in order to accommodate your ask puts in jeopardy the current requirements that we're driving for right now. It'd be much easier to accomplish these on time or maybe even before, and then add a 2-week or a 2-month sprint on the back end in order to accommodate the new ask and do a phased in approach. Something like that. It provides like I said, a visual or quantitative metric that you can actually provide with, or to prevent scope creep and something like that. So another way to use it. So with that being said, it's question time. It's also hot seat coaching time. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then for the people, first timers, hot seat coaching, basically it's simple as this. You get the opportunity to ask me, Chris, and the other members on here. If you have a question based on anything that we've covered and how we can implement or help you solve a problem right now for your business, in order for you to implement it tomorrow or this week, something quick, now's your time to ask, so feel free. Or any thoughts, questions, comments about the course in general. So
I got a question for you, Chris, based on what you were talking about earlier. In the subject as you as a leader, you were talking about like if you need that hour a day, like whether it's to play video games or just to pretty much just make sure that you've got yourself and your priorities in check. That way you can perform at a high level. That way you have the best cognitive function and you're not making decisions. It's not affecting your decisions. Would you consider that like kind of like a mental aid station?
Yeah, that's a great question. Would I consider it a mental aid station? I would say yes, at least if it's going to affect your capability to provide effective leadership to your team, to provide a solid answer to your customer, or to give like your best product to someone. If it's the fact that if I get 3 hours of sleep, I know I can't perform, but if I get 4, I'm good to go. Like that's a hard line. That is I'm not mentally ready to be successful for whatever I need to do. If it's, I know I need to get to the gym, how many times in a week can you get off that? Can you go away from that before it starts to affect your mental state and where you're not performing properly, right? So everyone knows, and you've seen that, like at the end of the week, you've gone, you know what, I didn't hit it as many times as I wanted to. I don't feel great. Or, hey, you know what, I didn't get as much sleep this week because we had a busy week, but I planned for that. So I know I'm going to give it back to myself later. But if you're always going back and never like holding the line on what's important to you and what you won't sacrifice, then you start to lose that mental edge. and it only slides down from there. So I would agree with you that it is it's a mental education. I would agree.
There's also
Okay.
there's also a point too, Wade, where, and just to jump on what Chris said, there's a point of diminishing returns in mental and physical performance, right? Like if you're grinding away and away and away, and you're like, I got to go to the gym, I got to go to the gym, I got to perform, you're nervous about potentially passing the test, you can actually get to a point of diminishing returns where you're not resting enough, you're not having proper calorie intake, and you're just grinding your body down, and you feel like more gym time is the answer when it's actually the total opposite. You have, taken a day off, or maybe doing a lighter active recovery day and allowing your body to do that. And it's the same thing mentally, right? Like I remember specifically both physically and mentally, and I'll go through the mental aspect, right? When I was in the soccer medical course, we had to, obviously everything was pass or fail. So if you didn't pass like a certain exam, you're done. I remember there was a point where I was up like 3 days straight with like 2 straight hours of sleep only, trying to practice my algorithms and understand and mentally just memorize all the different drip rates and all the different like medications and implications that would do it, the mechanism of injury that I could potentially see. And I'm trying to do this. And it got to a point where on like day 3, I couldn't even get through the initial part of my sequence without screwing up. And it's at that point where I realized I'm doing nothing right now. Like you are just a drone walking around, So like I had about 2 days before, I immediately left on that 3rd day, went home, rested. I woke up, I did a light dry run, and then I rested again, and I just took the test. And thank God I did. And then because on that 5th day, I was fine. But if I tried to keep going the way I was, I wouldn't even have made it out of the initial pass fail round, and I would have been done. So you just have to measure what's acceptable and what's not, and like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy like that. I remember studying for an anatomy test, and I was just book studying. And I was like, after a long day of doing everything, 8 hours in class, I'm trying to do homework, and I got a test 2 days away. And I was like, I can't study tonight. I need to shut it down at 7 o'clock, be in bed at 8. And then I did more the next day. I got more out of it, and it's like, you're going to run into those days, but when you do, you'll know, try not to let the mental toughness get the best of you. You have to be smart about it too. So,
Yeah, I've definitely got let it get the best of me, and had a few burnouts to where I was like, okay, like I don't have the energy to do anything at all now. So just pretty much when you see that comment, that's like when you said you were up for 3 days, you were like, okay, like I'm drawing the line here. I need to go home and rest, So yeah, so just drawing the boundary is something that I just need to find
yeah.
improvement on.
And like when you're talking about a program too, there can be ramp up times, there can be, maintenance times, there can be base levels of your program. Then there's like rest and recovery or taper off times. If you build that stuff in, you're building a template or a system to alleviate those cram sessions,
Mhm.
that whole thing about what you did today to grow your business, or what you did today, if you do something every day, it will alleviate the risk of that cram session. Oh, I need to hit the gym so hard today because I missed 2 days in a row. It eliminates that fear in the back of your head, because you're kind of like watering that plant, you're growing, you always reap what you sow, right? So if you water and grow every day, then that'll alleviate that burnout, because you're having a consistent basis and a consistent development,
Just compounding your efforts.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Really, yeah, go ahead.
Just a couple of comments. First of all, I don't know where you get your 4 hours of sleep, Chris, 4 or 5 hours, but from all the research that I've read, and some of my clients are neuroscientists who write books about sleep, 4 or 5 hours not going to cut it. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 days ever so often, but you really need between 7 and 8 hours of sleep to really be able to regenerate your mind, which, as leaders, whether you're managing a team, an organization, or a battalion, creativity is what you need. When you see a problem solving is 100% creativity. You have to be able to bring things together that don't make sense, make quick decisions. And if your mind is not in a place that is rested enough that can pull from places, you're always going to make the wrong choice, or you're not going to make any choice. You're going to be you're going to freeze because you can't process. It's just when Jeff was talking about, he couldn't even see his things. That kind of happened. So that one, but I just wrote a post that's going to go out tomorrow, and I was thinking about just life in general, and the line that kind of came to me said, your dreams, in this case, your priorities. Let's go ahead and replace words, but may set the course for your life, but your habits will chart the journey. So you may want to do something, you may have aspirational ways that you want to lead people, but if your habits are not aligned with what you want to do, you're never going to get there. It's going to be hours. So if you don't create habits, I go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock. I get up at 4:30. I'm in the gym by 5. I'm in the office by 8. I eat dinner at 5:30. There's a structure here, and I read, this block of the day, not because I'm great, just because I know if I don't do that, I won't get all it in, and if I do, it won't be good. And so I write in the morning. I don't write in the afternoon because my best writing time is between 9 and 11. So those are my freshest, most creative things. And being in marketing technology, all my marketing clients, I need to be able to be very creative. So that's not an option. I have to be fresh. So that to me is like, if you figure out what your rhythms are and create habits, even small ones, and build on those and just make those, these are not optional, it's going to happen. I think that's going to prevent you from getting, well, I want you here at this time. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that. This is where I'll be there this time, or I'm don't take meetings before 8 o'clock because I'm going to be in the gym, so those are types of things. Now, always there's exceptions to every rule. But for rule of thumb, you got to do this. And dude, you need to sleep more. I don't know if you're sleeping 4 hours a night. You need to have a talk to yourself.
No, that was it's only like, I know that if I don't get about like 4 hours, I'm like, yeah, it's not going to be a good day. But usually, I agree with you.
4 hours is a good nap. That's what that is.
There was just sometimes that we were like, yeah, I only have 4 hours of sleep. Like that's all you got. So, but I definitely agree. I do the whole 8 hours of human podcast is all sleep. Pretty important. Jeff and I have this app we use for like mental recovery.
Yeah.
So it's called, I'll put it in the chat. It's called Newcom. It's a whole thing. They use it for a lot of special operations guys to assist with like combating TBI and things like that, and to rebuild neural pathways and to like go back against like sleep apnea and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things we've been working on with like the sleep aspect. So, but to your point, I think the biggest thing with the habit, that's huge. I knew that Jeff brought it up, but I'd be in training before selections, and I was getting up at 5 a.m., swimming 3 miles and going to class, and then playing sports and doing D1 stuff. And then I'd go in the afternoon, I'd be running, and it got to a point where I was failing on the field, failing in classes, failing, like not getting faster in the water, and it's just like that overuse of either your mind or your body or whatever. Even if you're doing all the right, your habits are matching up. If you're doing too much, it's always going to affect it. So I was giving way too much time to the mission, right? I was giving way too much time to that. I wasn't giving any time to myself. And so I never like reflected on that until you end up failing a test or whatever. And you have to be like, oh, wow, I didn't hit a deadline. I messed something up. So I definitely been in that position where I've overused, underslept, and it's not good. So.
No, that was very well said, Murillo. Absolutely. Habits will definitely chart the path. That was awesome.
Yeah,
All right.
give me credit next time you use that. Let's just make sure. A wise man that I know said this. You just, you don't have to name me by name. You just give credit to, somebody.
No problem. No problem. That'll be on my LinkedIn page tomorrow. Wise man once told me. All right. So what else we got?
Hey everyone.
Oh, go ahead, Lindy.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So my name is Linda. Wade invited me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course. He told me and I was like, of course I'm gonna join. So I have a very important work project that I'm presenting in front of 1,000 people in 2 weeks. And I find myself being very anxious in the morning about it. And I know like it's go time, right? Like I need to get my stuff together. I need to get my mind right because it's a live session as well. So I have like a plan in my head. I'm going to script these things out and I'm going to take my time. But any thoughts or suggestions on like managing the anxiety when you're, you know, approaching this important date?
Yeah, so I'm going to kick this off, and then Chris, I know you got tons of this stuff, and please jump in after. The one thing I'll say real quick, right? I have the same situation, or I've had situations in the past, and the number one reason is because you feel like you're not ready or you're not prepared, right? It's a natural feeling, and I don't know how many times you've done this, but even the more you do it, you still will always have this, right? The one thing you can always do, you're preparing the right way. You're preparing, correct? So you're doing the right stuff. Practice. I'm going to tell you right now, Linda, if you need to practice your speech, call me and we'll set up a Zoom call and you can run through the whole thing. Seriously, like just get used to, because when you practice in front of people, whether it's, you know, us here, by yourself in the mirror, like thinking it through your processes is one thing, and getting your thoughts straight is absolutely the right first step. But actually saying it, I'm going to tell you, I wish I learned this so much sooner. I was like, I got all my notes, everything's going to come out. And then once I started speaking, I was like, you know, and what you need to kind of like, you kind of need to get that in motion already. So you need to practice your flow and like practice how you're going to say it, what you're going to say. And you're like, oh, I don't really like how I said that. That sounded good in my head. It doesn't sound good. The more you do that, and the more confident you're going to feel about the content, because now you've already stated it 10, 20, 30, 100 times by the time you get to that meeting. You know, like if you can do all the studying and preparation you want, but a real like extra feather in your cap, if you will, is if you've actually rehearsed it out loud, it flows differently. Things sound differently, you know, and you're going to see how the subjects will connect differently. So I highly recommend practicing in your mirror, practice in front of 1 to 2 people, practice in front of us or me in Zoom. Feel free to reach out by all means. Absolutely. Set up a Zoom call, no problem with you. But I would say the more practice of the actual flow, it's just going to flow more naturally, because by the time you get up there, you've already said it. You're not going to look and what to say. So Chris, jump in.
Linda, I don't know if you have any questions about what Jeff said, if you want to ask me anything first before I go, but
Oh no, I'm just, thanks
Okay.
for offering that. And that was great feedback.
Okay. Do you have the 2 things I would ask before I share kind of perspective? Do you have kind of like a detailed plan of, I need to accomplish all these steps before I know that this is a complete finished product to present, be it the presentation or whatever? You have that like list built out with timelines associated over the next 2 weeks?
So I have a training agenda, and the training agenda is outlaying what the presentation itself is supposed to hit. And I think I would definitely feel better once I look at it more and be able to fill in the gaps, because there's like training videos and there's PDF walkthroughs with screenshots that I still need to create. So it's like the presentation itself, the structure, and then the training materials within that, I need to do both. And then I need to do the script as well in 2 weeks. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is a bit much. And yeah.
I completely understand that. So a lot of times, procrastination is not I'm failing or I'm anxious. It is I'm stuck because I don't know where to attack first, right? So in this situation, you know that we can use one of these models, right? Level of effort, right? And so you say, what are the things you know are going to take most time? It's probably going to be putting together, you know, the script is going to follow your slides and your presentation. Okay, that's going to be like, you'll write that out as you go. That's probably the least amount of effort. If you look at your training aids and you look at your PDFs and everything that's supposed to go in there, that's probably gonna take a ridiculous amount of time to create over the next 2 weeks. So like That may take the most time. Let me put that at the forefront. That's really important. I'm going to assign a level of 6 to that, whatever. And then you know that the last thing is making sure it all looks good, putting the presentation together, all that. So like based on those level of priorities, what tasks you have to accomplish to make sure the training aids are done. Each individual training aid, how many of them do you have to do? How much does each one take? And like, I think you would do really well by sitting down and like writing that out. Even if it takes 30 minutes, you have 30 minutes to go, this is what it's going to take to accomplish all this. And it looks like a huge list, but knowing is way better than not knowing. So, yeah.
There's
Once
no way I can complete
Yeah.
that without like organizing myself prior. So yeah.
I know you're gonna be successful doing that. So my partner, she is a professional speaker, so she does presentations like that all the time around the country. She's done like hundreds and hundreds of them, right? And so she's also a professor, but she gets anxious before every single one of them. And the reason is because she knows exactly what she's going to say. She's presented all the time, but she understands that when I show up, it may be a different crowd. They may not give me the feedback I need. They may not do so. There are some things too that you might want to look into in terms of like presentation stuff that will make you feel like I'm going to fall back in my training. And Jeff did a bunch of this in the Green Berets and everything. Like anytime there's a live situation, you fall back in your training. So in a situation, if something goes wrong, I would at least also talk about what do I do if I have something that goes wrong? Do I, like, if I have a technical problem, the presentation goes down. Do I have a backup? Do I know that if someone cuts me off or my video cuts out, what do I do? Right. So at least that way you've already thought through potential options of what's going wrong and how to fix it. So I would just say that too. Those are my 2 kind of pieces of advice. Set yourself up by task orienting the next 2 weeks and assign time and based on the priority of how much time it's going to take. And then also think about during the presentation or for whatever happens, if something bad happens and it's really bad, how do I fix it? And what do I do for it? So just my thoughts.
And Linda, I'm just going to jump in because I work with a lot of speakers. Part of my client base are people who are on stages, massive stages, thousands of people every week. And I always watch them do their craft. And but the number one, besides all these guys told you great ideas, but when you get up there, the number one thing I would like for you just to think through is just that, you know what? I want to give people value. I like these people. I want to help them. And I'm going to smile because this is going to be good for them. Because I'm, so if they relate to you as a person and they see that you are, one of them and you're trying to help, 90% of the information can be delivered elsewhere, but they're going to buy it from you, not just for your knowledge. And you seem to be a really personable person. You have a great smile. So you probably can knock this out really. You're never going to have 100% confidence on anything, doesn't matter what it is. I know people who've been speaking their entire lives that they're just freaked out just every single time. It's like, dude, you do this for a living. Why are you freaked out today? But but at the same time, when they got on stage and you feel like, man, I like this guy, I can trust him, I'm going to listen to him. And I think that's the most important thing from a communicator point of view. Now, the content has to be good. So that's why you're creating all the other stuff. But that to me, if the content is great and the communicator is a jerk or somebody like, this person who just comes across as a know-it-all and I just can't stand them, it's a lot harder to get the information across because they're going to go, oh, whatever, you don't know anything about your saying, you just came here to show up, all the things. But I would say, be yourself, relate to them. Hey, guys, create some kind of one-on-one. Hey, tell a story that makes you human. We love humanity. We hate people on stage that think they know more than we do. So anyway, do what they said and walk with confidence into this thing, and it's going to be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that's such a great point about the content and versus who's presenting it. So Linda, do you know who Alex Hormozy is?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I figured, right? Like everyone knows Alex Hormozy, but you got to ask, you get a baseline. So I love Alex Hormozy because of literally one reason. And it's so weird. If you go to acquisition.com and actually look at his presentations, they're like cartoon characters and it's stuff he draws on the whiteboard. It's like 5-cent content thrown up there or 5-cent presentation with $100 million content. And it's all in how he presents it. And like to Murillo said, the value Like I am reading his book. I've pre-ordered the new one, $100 million leads, like volume 2.
Yeah.
And like there's just notes in that thing, and a lot of them are his little stupid cartoon pictures. Like it's not, it's all about in the value that you bring, and that's how he does it. And like to his point, to Murillo's point, like he's a great presenter. He doesn't worry about, you know, how that looks. He knows he's personable, providing value, and he cares, right? He cares about making people scale their companies and becoming the next $100 million person. He literally wants that because he knows the value of doing that and the success people get out of it, right? Like that's why Chris and I are doing this. You know, we know the value. We're not at 100 million yet, but we're on our way, you know. But to Murillo's point, like you provide that sincerity and that value, that other stuff's going to come natural.
Okay. Yes, very, very helpful feedback. Thank you. And I didn't mention that it's a Zoom presentation, so it's a little easier, but still like,
Yeah, you know what? Do this. Do a Zoom meeting by yourself, record the whole thing, and then watch it back, because you'll be able to tell a lot of the things that you don't see when you're doing it, and you go, oh my gosh, I repeated that 5 times in one sentence. You know, just things that you don't see, and use one of the AIs that can write down every word, so you can have a transcript based on what you thought you were going to say and we actually said. And you can read the transcript because it's different when you read it as opposed to when you see it, you're talking. But do a Zoom video with nobody in the room, record it and watch it back. Best, you know, it's the best class you could ever do for yourself, because you're going to pick up more things that you don't want to do or want to do differently than anybody will.
Okay, thank you.
I do that, by the way. I have done those, you know, presentations, and it's so hard sometimes because when I did presentations before Zoom was Zoom, I used to do live videos in a room full of people that I couldn't see. Talk about really horrible, like no eye contacts, no, like I'm losing them. These people are nodding or they're smiling, they're laughing at my jokes. I didn't know if the jokes worked. I didn't know if the story worked. It was just like blind. You just there's a camera, you go, you're live. And I'm like, where are they? You know, there's nobody here. So that is a really tough thing, because now Zoom, you can actually, you know, get some energy back from people. So I would, or at least 4 or 5 people, wherever as many you can get on your screen. But if you do it on the screen and you kind of see yourself, that would really be helpful. So try that.
Okay, will do. Yes. I hate when I'm talking to people on meetings and their screens are off and I'm the only one. I'm like, hello, like how are you? What's going on here? So yes.
That's a great point. And I think it's going to tie into what Renee's question is, really. So awesome point there in terms of like, if you're doing something in front of the camera, there's no audience, no feedback. It's kind of a low vibration, no energy to let you know, or people use nonverbal clues to see, hey, like I know I'm doing a good job. People are nodding their head, they're not asleep, they're whatever. So Renee, if you can answer this, was that a presentation in person or via Zoom or what? For the crowd you were with.
Hey, sorry. It was in person actually.
Okay. So what I've talked through, yeah, if you gotta go, please. Like I don't want to. Yeah, if you gotta go.
No, I'm just multitasking, so you're fine.
So usually with like crowds that aren't reacting, the biggest thing to focus on is, like Maria mentioned, the value. So what is the value add you're trying to give to them? And then some way to get feedback in terms of either, hey, what did you get out of this? What did you hear? How was the presentation? So a lot of times, and I'll bring it back to my partner. When she has a crowd that does not, because when she's live and a crowd doesn't react to a joke, they don't react to, they're like quiet, they don't laugh. And the subject she talks
Exactly, yeah.
about, right? So you're like, you should be laughing here. You should be interacting. You should be doing something. So that may not be you. So the other thing too is to realize that in almost every situation, it's always how the other person's still part of that communication circle, right? So they're still part of that. So a lot of times they may not be the crowd that reacts. They may not be that may be their norm. So if you want feedback, if you have someone you set it up with, you set that conversation up with, you set the presentation up with, I would ask like, hey, was that a normal reaction you usually do this? Hey, little one. Was that a normal reaction you see from people who do this, right? Have you seen this usually? Like, oh, that's how they always are. Or that's not how they usually are. Here's what happened today. Like, we all got bad news and laid off half the company. Like that.
Look at it, look at it.
So
Yeah, well, that's what it was a small group and I actually asked them, like, I don't know if you guys are really, if you guys are just quiet or if, I was just trying to ask them questions like, where do you want me to kind of take the workshop that I was doing? Because I was
Yeah.
just trying to, feed off of them and it's more of a customized workshop. So, but it's only happened twice now and it's just so awkward for me. But like you said, I guess maybe I should concentrate on it's not me and it's just that's how they are.
So that makes giving a little more context too. In those little small workshop sessions, a couple of those for clients, and sometimes like the clients like, oh, they have preconceived notion of what it's going to be. They have this idea of this is what I'm supposed to get, right? And so the one thing that I would go again is if you start the conversation, start off with, this is what I know you're going to be getting out of this, and at the end asking, hey, tell me what you got out of this. Did you get that? As long as you provided your value, even if they aren't reacting the way that you would expect them to, you know that you've accomplished whatever your mission was. And that's to provide them context, enablement, the mission, the little small group that you're doing, the cohort you're with, like, as long as you provide that value, however they felt about it because of something else that happened, or it's the 10th meeting of the day, or they're tired of these and they do them all the time. You may not know those, but
Right.
yeah,
Okay. So it's more normal, is what you're telling me.
it's definitely more normal, especially nowadays. Especially now,
Okay.
people are used to not being in person. So when they're in person, they still don't know how to react. It's very happens all the time now. It's crazy.
Thanks for that.
Would y'all recommend Toastmasters to be a good platform to use to develop your confidence in public speaking?
It wouldn't hurt. I actually looked into it. I think it was as I was transitioning out, Wade, just to make sure that I lost the 100% military jargon and formality aspect to learn how to like kind of. Maurelio's laughing. I can already see it. So I looked into it, and I think it's any opportunity to practice your craft, right? It takes a while to master your craft, like we've said, and that includes speaking. And there's a certain flow to it. There's a certain context. Every industry is different. And as Renee mentioned, every audience is different. Speaking to a group of marketers is going to be a hell of a lot different than speaking to a group of engineers or IT specialists, and it's way, speaking to extroverts versus introverts. Everything's going to be different. And the only way that you really get better at it is by exposing yourself to a variety of different crowds, engaging in conversations and just having small talk with people and kind of just, having that dance, that flow of a conversation. The more you do it, the better you'll be at. So I don't think it's a bad investment at all, because being able to properly communicate, there's a reason why it's the biggest pillar in the foundational pillars of leadership. And it's right dead center. Proper communication empowers all the other different pillars around it. You need it in order for everything to succeed. So I don't think there's any harm in any way that you would get better at it. So, Chris?
The only thing I would add, Wade, I would say that this one book, there's a book I read called What Everybody is Saying. It's by an FBI investigator, interrogator, and it's about what your body language is saying and conveying. So I would do the other thing too, is put some time and research into your body language. Again, I'm going to bring this up just because it's public speaking kind of thing. My partner is an extreme introvert, but she does public speaking for a living, and she goes out and gives these presentations and looks approachable, happy, talks, has a great tone of voice. And so there's a couple TED Talks that talk about this too, but your tonality, the way you present yourself, what you wear, your smile, as Marilio brought up, all those things and all those nonverbals, what your body says, endears people toward you and toward the subject you're bringing up, even if internally you don't feel confident about what you're doing. So if you learn how to present yourself in a way that is extroverted, happy, or matches your nonverbals, match up with your verbal, your conversation points, then people always believe you're a good public speaker. They're always going to believe that you're presenting a message that they want to hear. So I would look to that too. It's a great book. It really helped me out with understanding, like if I'm turning away from people and I'm looking this way, do you feel like I'm talking to you? No, you feel like I'm ignoring you, right? So it's like if I don't smile at you when you show up, right? So every time that someone shows up on a Zoom, I'm like, hey, how's it going? Because I've shown them that you caused me to smile to make you feel good. I may not be the most extroverted person, but in a situation, I'm always showing that I always want to make people feel closer and in a better situation. So there's things in non-verbally that I would really look into, as well as the speech and Toastmaster stuff. But if you learn that stuff on your own, you can incorporate it. So when you go to Toastmasters, you get the most value and you're not just wasting money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that body language definitely has an effect on what resonates with audiences, or just even having a conversation with just one-on-one type of person, you know?
Yeah.
Has anyone researched or like used the principles of neuro-linguistic programming or NLP?
I have not. Chris, you jumped at that. It seemed like you have experience. So go ahead.
I've not used it, but I've definitely looked into it. It's something that they talk about with, like, again, with it was along the same line of what Joe Navarro was writing in his book and talking about. So I think it's an awesome field. It's not something I have a lot of time to study, but I think it's an awesome field, to be honest. I don't know if you want to go into it for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about.
I looked into it a few years ago and I was fascinated by it, but like it's kind of hard for me to explain exactly what it is. But it has to do with psychology and like the way you use your words and how it's received by the other person. So I guess like using words that the other person also uses to get familiar with them. Tony Robbins NLP technique. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do some more reading about that because I was always fascinated by it.
This is what go ahead, William.
My book, the negotiator guy, that what's his name, that wrote the book on how to negotiate. There's a technique that he uses called mirroring, and how you start mirroring somebody's mannerisms,
Yeah.
and rephrase their own things, and that makes them feel very comfortable with you, because they, it's like, well, they don't see it as happening, but basically you are giving them back what he's giving to you, so he feels very comfortable, the language, the mannerisms. And that's a negotiating, but it's based a lot on those principles. What's his name? That's I love that book, The Art of Negotiating, or no,
Yeah.
Oh,
what's dude's name?
did he write 48 Laws of Power?
No. This is he's an FBI negotiator, crisis negotiator, that learn how to negotiate crazy situations where he would go in.
Chris Voss.
Chris Voss, yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Chris Voss' book is excellent. It's really practical. It's easy to read, and gives you and it's it's a great for any kind of speaker. Anytime you have engagement, especially public speaking, because you kind of figure out how to read the audience and respond to it.
The thing that it speaks to specifically with that mirroring and everything, you're presenting only the image of yourself that resonates most with your audience. So by doing the same things, speaking about the same subjects, believing the same stuff, mirroring and all that, you're only presenting the image of yourself that resonates most with them. So therefore they see themselves in you. That's kind of like the idea, the psychological next step from what I read and all that stuff. But yeah. So I do it a lot in terms of, like, you see a lot more in relationships between significant others. You see a lot more that mirroring and the neurolinguistic stuff. So if you do a lot of research in that, that's where you see it, but you can apply that to business and everything else.
Yeah, I definitely I know the mirroring part, and sometimes I do that just to see like what happens. And it's kind of fun to see. But yeah. Like you just, change based off of what you see the other person doing. Yeah. Cool.
Can't find the book.
So I know we're 10 minutes over. If you do have to drop, if you have anything that has to come up, please let us know, like you're good to go. But if anyone has more questions or anything you want to bring up or talk about, all ears.
This is great stuff.
Never split the difference. Negotiating it with your life dependent on it. That's the book. Chris Voss.
Yeah.
Chris Voss book, that'll come up.
I have a bunch of stuff to look up. I love that. New calm, AI transcription, Chris Voss.
What I would recommend is if you do write out your kind of like your skeleton of here's all things I need to accomplish for coming up your presentation. Definitely you can run it that even if if you can't show the stuff, whatever, but if you want to run that by Jeff and like go through the presentation, talk about it, and have them like, does all this make sense? Does this work? Do you have enough time? Like have someone outside of just you reviewing it, knowing someone's in your corner and your team, like please reach out to him, email him, and he's gonna help you out.
I
Seriously.
love how you're volunteering Jeff to do that, Chris.
Oh yeah, he's in the leadership. The email came from him, so you know.
Great negotiation.
Hey, wait a minute. Is it Chris? Are you coaching the advanced communications class? Is our
I
next
am
seminar?
You need any help? Don't
Delegation.
ask, and Jeff will help you. No questions asked.
I mean, it's right. I deliver results for sure. But if there's an SME on communication, it's Chris.
I love that. I'm gonna do that next. Whatever you guys need, this guy here is gonna take care of it.
I know this is gonna
It's a
come back to
graceful
haunt me.
sidestep. It's a graceful.
Good job.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you everyone for your input on my situation.
Of course. Of course.
I'm gonna be so ready in 2 weeks.
I've got to bounce. So good being here with everybody. Have a good
Absolutely.
night, you guys.
Y'all.
All right, thanks, guys. And hey, just remember, we're back next week, next Tuesday, same time. Next week, I believe we are covering emotional intelligence. So big, important
Like that.
aspect
Yep.
for leadership. So
Thanks for inviting people.
yeah, hey, spread the word. We love this. Let's grow the community even more. So
Absolutely.
with that being said, you guys have enjoyed the rest of the week. I am going to post this video on my YouTube channel so you guys can look back at any time. Just send me an email if you guys have problems with the link, and we'll see you next Tuesday for emotional intelligence.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone,
Have a
great
good one.
evening.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye, guys.